Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today, I am joined by an up-and-coming super talent who should be on your reading radar, Deanna Cameron. Deanna is the author of the YA suspense story Homewrecker, released earlier this month by Wattpad Books. It's her second published novel, which is an impressive accomplishment when you consider that she's just 25 years young. Deanna was first discovered on Wattpad, having surpassed more than 1 million reads for What Happened That Night, a novel she first posted to the platform in 2015. Since then, the book has been published in North America and throughout Europe, and was recently reissued with new cover art. Homewrecker is the harrowing story of 16-year-old Bronwyn, whose life is ripped apart when a tornado destroys her trailer home. Gone missing in the storm, Bronwyn's mother is later found dead, though the cause isn't accidental. It's strangulation, possibly a consequence of her drug addiction. Forced to move in with her biological father and his family, Bronwyn vows to avenge her mother's death. More than a murder mystery, Homewrecker is a realistic coming-of-age story about family, friendship, forgiveness, and fresh starts in the wake of tragedy. Top 500 Amazon reviewer Kathleen G. gave Homewrecker 5 stars, noting, "Read this as a novel about a teen trying to reconcile different lifestyles and fold herself into what is essentially a new family. Good YA reading." I loved chatting with Deanna, whose future is achingly bright with potential, and whose example proves that it's never too early to pursue a dream. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Central Booking. I am very excited to be in the virtual company of Deanna Cameron, who is the author of Homewrecker, which is out right now from Wattpad. It's a really awesome cover. You can't see it so well on my Kindle, but you're going to have to check it out. So before we start, I just have to say, I am very impressed by how well you write for how young you are. So let me just say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. It's a gift. I mean, reading it, I was inspired, and it just goes to show that if you have the talent, age really is incidental. But as I mentioned, so your new book is Homewrecker. It just came out about a week ago, and it opens with a tornado. So it's a very dramatic opening, but the tornado, it's an actual weather event, but it's also, kind of symbolic of the storm to come. So I'm wondering if you can tell us how this occurrence incites the action that follows in your book.
Well, initially, it was just a weather phenomenon I've always been fascinated by. There was like an almost tornado when I was a little kid that freaked me out. And ever since then, I've been kind of fascinated by them. And I'd wanted to write a tornado in a book before, but I'd never been able to get it right. And I thought that would be such an interesting way to begin a story where something changes so much. I mean, tornadoes literally rip homes down and throw them around who knows where, miles away. And that seemed like a really symbolic metaphor for what would happen to Bronwyn. So I thought that was perfect and fun to write about.
Yeah, and very well done. I wanted to like duck under my covers. I was like, ooh, this is getting bad. And we've had some strange weather in Connecticut, in recent years too. So it kind of gave me some flashbacks to that, though nothing quite as severe as what happens in your story.
Right.
But also it's really interesting because the tornado, and this is not a spoiler, we find out really quickly that it's sort of the cover for another incident that happens in this book. But the protagonist is 16-year-old Bronwyn, and she basically gets, caught in the storm after school, and she comes home and she's pulled away from her trailer. She has to go somewhere safe, and she's very much worried about her mother, who disappears in the aftermath of the storm. And we find out that not only has mom perished in the storm, but there was a murder. It wasn't, a natural death caused by this phenomenon, but there was some foul play, involved. So I think that's a really intriguing premise. So I was hooked, very quickly by that. So I just wanted to set the scene with that background, but I did want to ask you a bit about Bronwyn, because she's 16 going on 17, and she's almost, more adult than child given her life circumstances. Her mom has suffered with a drug dependency. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the dynamic between mother and daughter, and also how that sort of unusual upbringing influences Bronwyn's, own sense of self.
Well, I had chosen that sort of dynamic because I was fascinated by it. I had seen, I'd read some books and I had seen documentaries, and I thought that was a really interesting dynamic to pursue. I grew up with like great parents who didn't have those problems, so I thought it would be kind of interesting to do almost the exact opposite of what I grew up with and kind of put myself out of my comfort zone there and just explore a new dynamic where one is dependent on the other, but it's not the parent who is the child's not dependent on the parent, it's the other way around. And what was the second question again?
Beats me. So I'm just wondering, growing up in sort of that unusual circumstance where the child becomes like the parent, how does
Yeah.
that, sort of shape how Bronwyn sees herself and her responsibility to other people? Because it's not how most teenagers would view themselves.
Yeah. I think it did give her like one thing a lot of people point out that Bronwyn is a very angry character. And I think, she doesn't quite want to admit it to herself, especially after her mother dies. She doesn't want to say, well, I'm kind of mad at my mom for raising me this way, especially now that I realize things could have been different. And I'm mad at all these people that things weren't different. So I think she was very angry about the whole thing and was trying not to be angry or redirecting her anger actually towards people who were trying to help her because she doesn't trust them. She grew up with a parent who would say, "Oh, we're gonna do this," and then that would never happen. Or I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get a job. We're gonna have a better life, and then that wouldn't happen. So it definitely left her with a lot of anger issues and a lot of trust issues when it came to her relationships with other people too.
Sure. And I read somewhere, you're talking about how readers were responding to her anger. And it's like, well, yeah, she has some good reasons.
Yeah.
Not misplaced anger by any means. So, anyway, in the aftermath of her mom's murder, so she's lost her mother, her home has been ripped away, and she ends up, having to go live with her father, who is David Soliday, a prominent senator. I was going to say prominent citizen. He is. He's also which makes him prominent. But he's been largely absent throughout Bronwyn's life, and then he takes her in with his family. So I'm wondering if you can tell us, about the inherent sources of conflict that happen in that kind of living arrangement and how you use those also to propel the story forward.
Well, I thought it would be very interesting, first of all, to kind of dive a little bit into that political world. I didn't want to go full on, but I am kind of interested in, um, I guess, more of the personal lives of politicians. You find out a lot of stuff, a lot of skeletons there. And, trying to write like a respectable politician, that's hard. um, but I thought it would be interesting to give her almost the exact opposite of what she had before. Before she had a single parent, was like on welfare, was struggling, um, you know, not, she wasn't the most present parent, although she was there. And then you have the whole total opposite, where now she's not only got two parents, but she's got all these other siblings, got this big house instead of a camper. She has a job herself. Her parents have jobs now. She's told, go to the mall and spend money. You deserve it, instead of, why did you do that?
Right.
So I thought that would be very interesting to just throw her into this whole new world and see, just kind of the reactions a person would have under those circumstances.
Sure. And I want to expand on that a little bit, just because one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book is you take these characters who very easily, sort of could have been cliche, and they're not, but it could have been the sleazy politician, the vindictive stepmom and half siblings, the derelict drug dealer, the sort of predatory older boyfriend. But you sort of flip it, and you consciously use stereotyping as a lens to explore how realities and perceptions differ. So I'm wondering if you can, tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure it was a conscious choice to do that, and it could have been easy to do the exact opposite, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, the decision for the Solidays was I didn't want to give her this whole new set of bad parents. You move from one parent who's struggling to a new set of parents where you don't get any happily ever afters there either. But they had to kind of realistically have their flaws. It didn't quite make sense. Oh, well, they're great people who've just been gone from your life the whole 16 years. They had all their reasons. I wanted them to be a little bit more relatable and just a little nicer. I feel like a lot of stepmothers get a bad rap, and I think we have Cinderella to thank for that. And, I think it would be really nice to kind of talk about step-parents who are also present in their lives and interested and, excited to be involved in that family dynamic. Kingston, the boyfriend, he was kind of inspired by the fact that, like, well, he's got kind of like a sketchy, a little bit of a sketchiness to him. A lot of people said that. And I kind of wanted to talk about how someone could be sketchy, but not necessarily outwardly aggressive or violent. I think that's a misconception where red flags only come up if someone smacks you or if someone yells in your face. I kind of wanted it to have subtle red flags and to see if people picked up on them to say, hey, that's not okay, or that's kind of off. And a lot of people did, which I was happy about.
Right.
And then Jude, his personality was kind of inspired from people in my own hometown. I don't live in like the best hometown. There is like some, petty crimes and stuff, I guess, some drug activity. And people who involve themselves in it, they don't consider themselves to be bad people. They're not outwardly sinister or anything like they are on television. They're normal people who have their own problems.
Right.
I was actually once in a college class with a drug dealer, a former drug dealer anyway. He was not a great guy for other reasons, but he defended his actions as a drug dealer, and he said I was doing what I had to support my family. It wasn't like I wanted to do this or that I liked doing it, but it was what I had to. So it was kind of inspired a little bit, from conversations I heard like that.
Sure. And it was refreshing, to read those characters written in a different way. And sort of the irony of that is Bronwyn expects all of these people to be a certain way. And so then she's suspicious when they're actually, better, more decent people than she would have expected them to be. And
Right.
I love that element to the book.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and I wanted to ask you too. So you have a teenager who, by circumstance, sort of has to become an amateur sleuth, a detective. She wants to figure out what happened to her mom, and she's not really convinced that other people are taking it as seriously as they should. So I wanted to ask you one, just about the challenge of sort of legitimizing a teen sleuth, which can be hard to do. But I also wanted to ask if there were, any specific fictional or true crime, stories, podcasts, films, books that sort of inspired you.
Well, writing her as an amateur sleuth was actually pretty difficult because there's been, some reasonable criticism the past few years about teenagers solving crimes, with shows like Riverdale and things like that. Like, how do they have time to solve these murders that police, detectives, people who are educated, how do they not get it? But these teens who have algebra and SATs to study for, they get it. So it was, kind of difficult to find the little spot where it's like, okay, it's reasonable here. I watched a lot of true crime documentaries. Basically anything on investigation discovery, I will watch. And it was, I guess, kind of inspired by they'll oftentimes have victim family members do interviews. And, they're of course wondering, who did this? Why did this happen? Who could have ever wanted to hurt this person? And I don't know if that's necessarily an investigative thing or if that's just natural to wonder. And so I did that with Bronwyn and then added just a little bit more of, well, I don't trust other people to take care of it for me. I've never trusted anyone to take care of anything for me. So I'm going to try and, figure this out on my own.
Sure. And so I wanted to ask you too, this book and your previous book, which we will circle back to in a little bit, they stand alone, but if I understand correctly, the setting is the same. It's a town called Shiloh, and there is a community that's sort of impoverished. underprivileged. And you had touched on this about, being able to draw in your own neighborhood growing up. But I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how you were able to, use things that you've seen in your own life to depict this kind of community in a way that's nuanced and sympathetic, because there's a lot more, to poverty and being underprivileged than sometimes we're led to believe. And I think that comes through in this book, and a lot of times it might not.
Yeah, thank you. Well, a lot of it, you'll see a little bit more of it in What Happened That Night than in Homewrecker, because Homewrecker kind of takes place in a different town, although she's from Shiloh. But a lot of the stores, the restaurants, they were kind of modeled after the ones I had gone to. There was this scene in the original draft of Homewrecker where she goes to a restaurant that was very similar to one here in my hometown, but it got cut, so it's not there anymore. But on the original draft on Wattpad still, you can find it. So adding those little pieces, if you want to just add how people are on welfare or people struggle with addictions, or if you want to just talk about that, then it does paint a very negative picture of a lot of towns in North America, all over the world probably even. But if you add those other little places, like those cute little restaurants where the waitresses know your name and what your favorite table is, and the bookstores and little parks. I mean, there's like this one park around here that's got a funny name, and everybody loves that park. And just adding those little home touches that are more than just, the economy is not so great around here, and understanding that that does influence a lot of people's lives. I've seen that meme going around everywhere that's like, they'll show pictures of celebrities before and afters, and they're like, don't worry, you're not ugly, you're just poor. So I think, would these people be similar to how society expects and wants other people to behave if they just had the right resources? I think so. And underneath, I think you can still kind of find that in their interactions. They still care about other people, but they have, struggles.
Sure. And I wanted to mention the Ethan character too, who is, somebody Bronwyn befriends when she moves in with sort of her new family. And I will say, as a horror buff, other horror buffs, you will appreciate Ethan and, his love of scary movies and his trivia. He loves to discuss trivia and sort of the tropes of horror movies. So there's sort of a whole subtext of that, which is really, really fun. But he's an interesting character because he's sort of the counterbalance to Kingston. We talked a bit about Kingston and how, he's edgy, he's a bit older, he's 20, and Bronwyn is 16 going on 17. So can you talk about what Ethan represents in this story?
Ethan represents, I would say, the kind of guy that I think, that girls, hetero girls, I think that they should kind of look for. Maybe not necessarily to the T, but there are so many girls I know who are in relationships with guys who don't really like to hang out with their parents, or who don't really like to hang out with their friends, don't really care too much about their interests, want to do this or that, involves them more. It kind of seems to be a more selfish relationship, and girls just, a lot of them would be kind of self-conscious and they would go with that. And I wanted to write a character that was different, who was like, no, if a guy likes you, he should want to hang out with your parents. I mean, he might be scared to death, but he should, want to meet them and get along with your friends. One of my favorite lines is him. This might be a bit of a spoiler, but at one point, Bronwyn thinks he likes one of her friends, and that kind of sends her in a bit of a spiral. And he eventually tells her, no, I'm just trying to get along with your friends. I want your friends to like me, and I know they don't like Kingston, so I'm trying extra hard.
Right.
And that was just something I really wanted. And I also thought, I mean, someone had pointed this out a while ago, how love interests, I guess that's a bit of a spoiler too, but he's counteracting Kingston, so of course he's going to be a love interest. But they'd point out that a lot of love interests don't have hobbies. They kind of just seem to exist in the protagonist's world, and their family, their other relationships, hobbies, they don't really factor into the story too much. And I felt like that prevented them from becoming well-rounded characters.
Right.
So that's why he loves horror films so much, is because I wanted him to have something that he cared about outside of the relationship with Bronwyn.
Well, that's great, and it's such a strong ensemble cast too, which is nice because a lot of times you have your protagonist as the focal point, and then there rarely are sort of these just cardboard characters that are there to serve a simple purpose.
Yeah.
You don't get that sense here, which was really terrific. And one thing I did want to mention, I don't know if there's a question in this or not because I'm not sure how much you thought about it. I know some people are really hung up on names, and I know other people find it more incidental. But I don't usually think about names when I'm reading a book, but there were so many distinct names in this book that they've kind of all stuck with me. There's the Bronwyn and the Kingston, and there's an Andy with an I because it's a girl, and there's an Indy. So like super name choice. I don't know how much you thought about that or deliberated it, but it was strangely
Well, it
memorable.
takes a while. There was actually supposed to be an Izzy in there too. It's now Ginny.
Okay.
But when I was editing it, I was like, Andy, Indy, and Izzy. No, someone's got to change.
Before we move on to more general territory, if you don't mind, I did want to ask you about one thing that I read in the acknowledgement section. People who know me know that I love acknowledgement sections. Sometimes I find them, as entertaining as the book themselves. But you sort of talked about, how this idea stuck with you, even when there were other books and stories that sort of passed and you could never quite wrap your hands around them and stay in tune with them. So I'm just wondering if you could talk briefly about what it was about this book, this premise that you couldn't let go of and you knew you had to take all the way.
Well, this was the first book I'd finished in 4 years. I wrote What Happened That Night, wrapped that up in 2016. And I didn't start Homewrecker until, 3 years later, and it took me about a year to finish. So for those 3 years, I was trying to make essentially this one idea work, rewritten 18,000 times. Change this detail, change that detail, added this character, took away that character. It was not working, but I wasn't ready to give up on it because I had plans. And eventually, I was, oh, hey, my cat's right here all of a sudden. I didn't know she was in the room. um, Eventually, I had rewritten the idea 18 times already for 18 first chapters. I think I made it about 70 pages into one of the books, one of the versions. And then I was just like, no, I hate this book. It's not what I want it to be. And then I got an email from my editor saying, hey, let's talk about this book. And I was like, no, I don't want to talk about this book. Here's a new idea instead, because I had kind of, in my attempts to make the version work, came up with a new version, which is Homewrecker. But basically none of it stuck. None of the old version stuck. That the first, the idea I was trying to work out had a sister dying instead of a mother. And just trying to make it work. I added a tornado because I thought, oh, the tornado will help it work. Wouldn't. But I came up with Homewrecker trying to figure out how to make that idea work. And when my editor said, so let's talk about next book, I was like, yeah, so I'm actually giving up on the book you're talking about. Here's my new idea. And then while they were mulling it over, I was like, oh no, it's been like 4 days. I haven't heard anything back. They wanted the other idea. Okay, I'm gonna make it work this time. All right, so I sent a new outline. I was like, I made the book work. I'm gonna make it work this time. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't want that one. We want the first one you were talking about. We want the one with the tornado in it. Hi, kitty.
So time well spent then, it all worked. Now there's a cat, so this video might go viral,
I know. I didn't even know she was in here. She was under my bed.
What they do, they sneak. But that's an awesome story about how it sort of became the story, the book that it needed to be after.
Yeah. And it was the fastest book I'd finished in like years, probably since I was, I don't know, 13 years old.
That's incredible, though, how it worked out that way. Slow start, but bang. And I wanted to ask, too, if I can use the term discovered. You were sort of discovered on the Wattpad platform, and they also have a publishing branch. So for people who aren't really familiar with that, can you tell us a bit about the forum and how it works?
Yeah. I had been on there since... Okay, can you find somewhere to go? I have been on there since, I think, technically 2012. I think that's what my profile says, but I don't think that was my first profile. I think I had a different one before, and then I made a new one. Before I was on a different writing website. I still have some friends from that website, which is cool. I think I started that website when I was 12. I'm almost 25 now. So to have all those friends, is still pretty exciting. But that website had a lot of problems. It was great for finding friends and things like that, but a lot of plagiarism was happening. You were able to just copy and paste stories. And so everyone was like, no, we're not staying on this website. We're moving over to this up and coming Wattpad website. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to get left behind. I'm coming too. And that was how I went on Wattpad. That was 2000, probably around 2011 or 10. Wattpad was a bit different then, a little smaller. If you look up the old Wattpad profiles, that's what I had. And it's kind of interesting to just go back and look at what they had. They used to have instant messaging, which I thought was hilarious. I loved that. I wish they brought it back. But I had been on the website for years. I think that's a question a lot of people ask is, how can I get published on Wattpad? And I'm like, well, how about you give it 9 years and you publish like every week, and that's what worked for me.
Right. And so basically you cultivate an online audience, right? And if you
Yeah.
get enough attention, it might translate into other things. That's pretty awesome. So you previously mentioned your first book, What Happened That Night, which takes place in the same town, Shiloh. It came out a couple of years ago, but it was actually just reissued. So I'm just wondering if you can give us sort of a brief overview of that book as well for people who might be interested in learning more about that.
Yeah. If you read Homewrecker, but not What Happened That Night, Clara, Officer Porterfield, as she's more commonly referred to, that's actually the protagonist. So that her story takes place when she's 16 and 17. There's flashbacks. Her sister has just been arrested for the murder of her longtime crush and next door neighbor, Griffin Tomlin. And it's not a whodunit, it's more of a why done it. Why would my sister, who was perfectly normal and happy, do this? Or at least that's what everyone else is wondering. Clara knows why she did it. And she, it goes from flashbacks as to why, what happened the year before he died that made Emily want to kill him, and then what happens to Clara after Emily has been arrested and Griffin is dead and everyone else is wondering why, and she knows why, but she's not going to tell anybody why. That was a really interesting story to write, and I don't know if there are many books like it. I think there are a lot of whodunits, but I thought it was kind of fun to write. Okay, well, you know who did it. Figure out why now.
Oh, that's a good hook. You have hooks. It's so funny. Sometimes I think people have such great hooks and then it's hard to live up to that. But your books have so far, which
Thank
is
you.
terrific. And I did want to ask you, about sort of young adult as a genre, because both of these books, they fall into that, but they have crossover appeal. So I guess this is sort of a two-pronged question. So my first would be just what are the considerations that you keep in mind, when you are writing specifically for a young adult audience? But then I'm also wondering if you have thoughts on why young adult books tend to be so popular with adult readers. I read recently something like 25% of sales of young adult books are actually for adult readers. And I know that I like the genre myself, so I
Yeah.
figured if you write them, I would ask you.
Well, when writing them, I'm not sure I've done anything differently than when I started writing them as an actual teenager. I think maybe that helped, starting out when I was 13, kind of wishing people considered me to be like a grown-up teenager. And then I don't know, I guess like you said, it appeals to a lot of ages, not just young adults. I've read the genre since I was like 13, 12, 13 years old. And that's, I think, the reason why I still read it is because, I've got all these favorite authors who are still releasing books. And then they're promoting these other new authors who are releasing their debuts. And I'm like, ooh, I like the sound of that book. I picked one up the other day that was described as Morgan Matson meets You've Got Mail, and I was like, well, I'm down for that. I don't know. I think a lot of people feel very reminiscent about that time in their lives, and maybe it's more fun to read about, summer romances and school rivalries and things like that versus, oh, I need to pay my bills, student loans, my boss is mean.
That's a good point. It's so funny because all these problems we have as adults, then we realize we wish we could go back and deal with the things that we thought were, so terrible.
Right.
Years ago. And I have to say, Crystal, who's one of your publicists, when she said I have a YA book for you, I was so excited because I tend, to cover mostly adult, but I love to read teen. I just don't often, have a reason to. My deadlines are all adult. And I was like, oh, jackpot, because they're great. And I think they're so immediate too, where sometimes the adult books might take a little bit longer to get going. So it was a nice change of pace for me. Couple more questions, if you don't mind. I'm sure you get this a lot, but I have to ask you, how you endeavor to balance your life, because you said you're 25, you have 2 published books, you work, you're a college student. That's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of writing you have to do just to pass your college courses,
right?
let alone writing novels. So can you talk about how you, structure your life to be able to accomplish all these things?
I do almost everything part-time. I work part-time in retail, and there's not a lot of hours with that job, and it's why a lot of people don't stay there very long, but it's one of the reasons why I like it. I don't want a whole ton of hours with school and with writing books, so I'm good with that, with like 16 hours a week. That I live at home still. I don't have that many bills. With school, for the longest time, I was also part-time for a different reason. I didn't qualify for financial aid at first because I was homeschooled, and the school didn't have a record of me ever graduating high school. So they're like, okay, well, you need to do 24 credits before we'll let you apply for financial aid. So that was all out of my pocket. So that was for a long time just like 1 or 2 classes a semester, 3 at the most, because that was all I could afford. And so that left me with some time to do writing. And then when I was finally able to do school full time, I was just mostly editing, and then I wasn't writing a book at all. Right now, summer's coming up, so school is over, so I'm hoping to get like a good chunk of a new book done, and hopefully next semester, I like to plan everything out in I actually got it right here. I got it says Stay Positive on it.
Oh, that's great.
It's a little daily planner. I would write down all of my assignments for the week every day. 5 days a week, so that way I knew everything I needed to do and have that all organized, so I wasn't doing too much or too little on a certain day. And that would help me. I normally get out of work at like 9:30, so I would do a lot of my writing at like 11 or 12 at night. So I mean, it's a lot, but it's workable.
So as an aspiring writer myself, it's funny, I can always come up with compelling reasons. They're usually good reasons not to write. I mean, I'm a caretaker for somebody. I do book reviews and profiles and stuff, but I don't do a lot of my own fiction writing, which is what I want to do. And then I talk to somebody like you, and I'm like, man, she's got 2 books published. She's working. She's going to school. Like, if she can do all of this, maybe I should.
It sounds a lot busier when you say it like that than I feel like it actually is. I feel like there are a lot of moments where things just kind of work out. But there are also a lot of moments where I'm like, no, I'm not doing that today.
That's right. It's funny how sometimes the dishes and laundry look really appealing. I'm like, when else would I want to do that? Oh, a free pocket of writing time. I'll go.
Oh yeah, then as long as there's something worse to do, then writing's great.
Yeah. All right, so final 2 questions for you, if you don't mind. So
No problem.
I know a lot of times people who are maybe aspiring writers like to check in and maybe get some guidances to what they should do to pursue their own dreams. So in looking back on a writing life, or just a more creative life in general, I'd like to ask you, what is the best advice that you can remember ever getting? And then the best advice that you never got and had to kind of learn for yourself and wish that maybe you knew a little bit sooner, or somebody could have clued you into?
I don't remember any of the advice people gave me.
I
I feel like I must have asked it when I was really young, like 13, 14 years old, very impressionable, wanting to get where everyone else was and not quite realizing just how hard that is. And I guess that's what my advice would be. I think a lot of people, I mean, I get that question on Wattpad all the time. How do I get success? How do I get published? How do I get all these reads? And I feel like my answer is never satisfying because it's wait. This, like, I didn't just get here. I've been posting online since I was 12 years old, so like 13 years, more than half my life at this point. And I'm just now getting to where I am. I think some people kind of want magic solutions where it's like, okay, well, if you change your profile picture to this and you put this tag on your book, then you're going to have instant success, and Wattpad will be with you presently to discuss a 6-figure book deal or something like that. And it doesn't quite work that way. You have to put in a lot of work, a lot of it, and and then move on when no one responds to that work. You can't just wait for people to applaud you. You have to keep going and interact with other people. Don't just be your little island.
Right. That's excellent advice. And it depends too, what is your measure of success? Is it publication and, a platform, or is it just writing? Because I think there's pleasure in the writing itself. And I think you have to
Yeah.
enjoy that first before you think that it's going to make you famous. But you are right. It is a waiting game. And if you have the discipline to keep at it, then your chances, of making it, I think, are so much higher just because you've actually stuck with it.
Yeah.
So final question to you. You mentioned, that summer is coming up and you're hoping to have a nice chunk of writing time. And if you are superstitious and don't want to touch this question, that's fine, because some people don't. But I'm just wondering if there's, are ideas floating around in your mind that you think that you want to go in a direction that you can tease for us. We won't hold you to it.
Oh no, it's fine. I actually did start a new book a couple of months ago. I kind of had to for English class because they were like, your final project could be this, this, or this, or it could be 2 chapters of a book. And I said, I know how to do that one. So I do have a new book coming up. I haven't posted anything on Wattpad yet except for the summary. The summary is available in depth on Wattpad right now. It's called Dead to You. It's kind of inspired by the relationship dynamic between Princess Diana and Prince Charles and the royal family, what happened to her, and a lot of Taylor Swift lyrics. Taylor Swift, her 2 surprise albums have pretty much inspired this novel on its own. I do a lot more with scandal in this book, and some people have pointed out that the killer for Homewrecker is a little easy to spot. I see that, that was kind of the fun part of it, was just, sometimes the killer is a little obvious. This one, I'm hoping, is not so obvious. This one, I think everyone is going to be a suspect, and it's going to be like, well, we don't know who wanted her dead exactly, but we think the entire town's a good place to start.
Oh, I love it. But I love how, each of your books is so distinguished from the others, which is, I'm sure it makes that fun and challenging for you as a writer, but as a reader, it's refreshing too, because it's not the same recycled story. So
yeah. This one, I forgot to tease this part, but one of the things I'm most excited for is that this is the first time my protagonist has been a suspect herself.
Ooh.
So that's going to be kind of fun to write. One of the taglines for it is, when you point the finger at someone else, 4 turn back at you. So that's kind of going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of revenge in this book.
Oh, that's excellent. Dun, dun, dun. That is a good place to end it. All right. I'm so sold. So, I'll be keeping an eye out for that. But in the meantime, people have to go pick up Homewrecker. It is out right now, and it is so, so good. Deanna Cameron, thank you so much for being here and doing this.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.